All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful and maybe one of the most misunderstood concepts in the world of data privacy, legitimate interest. Today, we're going to cut through the noise and give you a practical guide for getting it right.
This quote just nails it. It feels like we're all swimming in buzzwords. GDPR, compliance, you name it. But here's the thing. Knowing the terms is the easy part. The hard part is proving you're actually walking the walk. And that's exactly where this thing called the Legitimate Interest Assessment, or LIA for short, comes into play. This is the key. It's what turns a dusty policy document on a server into something you can actually stand behind, into real, solid proof. Okay, so let's get into it. How do we actually make that leap from just talking the talk to taking real, defensible action? Well, it all starts with the basics. So first up, what is legitimate interest? Well, under GDPR, it's one of the legal reasons you can use to process someone's personal data. But, and this is the big but, it is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Your interests as a business can't just steamroll over an individual's rights. It's a mandatory balancing act.
And I really want to drive this point home. This isn't something you can just base on a gut feeling. It's not a "we think this is probably okay" kind of deal. The law is super clear. You have to follow a formal, structured process to justify it, and you better believe you need to write it all down.
Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question, right? If regulators ever come knocking, what does that proof actually look like? How do you build a case that's not going to fall apart the second someone looks at it closely?
Well, the answer is actually a surprisingly simple three-part test. This is the absolute heart of the entire legitimate interest assessment.
The whole LIA really boils down to these 3 steps. First up, you've got the purpose test. Simple enough. Why are you processing the data, and is it a legitimate reason? Second, the necessity test. Here you have to ask yourself, is this processing truly necessary to get the job done, or is there a less intrusive way? And finally, the big one, the balancing test. This is where you put your interests on one side of the scale and the individual's rights on the other, and see which way it tips.
And this right here is the fundamental tug-of-war you have to resolve. On one side, you have your business goals, things like preventing fraud or running a marketing campaign. On the other side, you have the fundamental privacy rights of a real person. The LIA is basically your written argument for why, in this specific case, your interests should win out. It's your official record.
Okay, so that's the theory. Makes sense, right? But what does this actually look like in the real world? How do you go from this idea to a document you can actually use?
Well, the good news is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The trick is to use practical tools. I'm talking about things like a master template that walks you through the questions, maybe a quick scoring sheet for a high-level check, or even looking at a pre-filled sample. These things can be lifesavers.
Let's take a super common example, like fraud prevention. I mean, every company has a clear interest in not getting ripped off, right? So a sample LIA would show you exactly how you justify processing specific data for that purpose and how you'd argue that the benefit of a secure system outweighs the risks to individuals. Seeing an example like that can really make an abstract rule click into place. Now, here's a crucial point, and it's where a lot of organizations trip up. Once you've completed your LIA, you're not done. A powerful LIA can't just exist in a silo. It has to be connected to your entire compliance ecosystem.
Seriously, think of it less like a checkbox you tick off and more like a living document. To be truly effective, it has to be an active, breathing part of your overall privacy program that informs everything else you do.
So what does that actually mean? It means your LIA should be directly tied to your data protection impact assessments. It has to show up in your record of processing activities, your ROPA, and the conclusions you reach in your LIA, they should absolutely shape the language in your privacy notice. And here's the big one. You have to do this before you launch any new product or marketing campaign, not after.
And this brings everything right back to where we started. Because at the end of the day, anyone can write a privacy policy. That's the easy part. The legitimate interest assessment, that's your proof. That's how you show you actually mean it.
So we'll leave you with this one question to think about for your own organization. If a regulator or even just a customer were to ask you tomorrow to justify why you're using their data, could you show them the proof?